Alrighty, now we're back. So instead of using a big brush, we're going to use a smaller brush and this Iraqi sand from Vallejo. Now instead of actually painting, we are going to drag the brush over the surface of the ship. That way we avoid putting the deck colour onto the superstructure. Alright, so bear with me. As you can see, I'm going the wrong way, so you can't see. Try that. All I'm doing is dragging the brush along the deck. That way I can't put the brush over the top of these little lumps and bumps, which are hatchway covers usually. Alright. So yes, this is not as easy as the other stuff. I'm just going to turn this around so it's easier to paint for me. Okay. I think we're set up a bit better. Alright, so all I am doing is nudging the brush around. There's no brush strokes here, there is just one continuous laying the brush on the deck. So all essentially I'm doing is swabbing rather than brushing. And as you can see, the paint is quite thin because I don't intend to do this in one go. If you make the paint too thick, it's going to be too hard to swab. So I intend to do 2 coats. Yep, 2 coats. Not 1 coat. So I like to keep the brush really, really wet, but I have a very dry atmosphere here. So that's why. Oh, it's a good shot of my hand. Okay, we have an arrow already on the side there. I am just going to wet my finger and do that. And the paint is gone. Just trying to get this mini into a position where you can see it as well. And I can still paint it. Alright, yep. Swabbing the deck. Not brushing, swabbing. So the other thing you can do is just ignore the hatchways altogether, paint over them and then paint them back in again. So that's a technique as well. Certainly works. Yep, this painting position is very, very awkward, and this is the very most difficult part of the job, as I said earlier. And if you paint over the hatches, it's okay. We can come back and clean them up, and I'll show you how to do that a bit later on. So yeah, so the idea here is swab. We're going to keep the brush on the Mini and run it around the ship. So I wish I could give you better commentary, but I'm really concentrating. And it is pretty self-explanatory. As you can see, I'm basically just pushing the front of the brush backwards and forwards and attacking the deck from different angles. Just a lot of turning the miniature around to get better angles to it. To try and not to use up this detail that we've already painted in. So yeah, so it does require you changing the position of the ship a lot, so you can attack from different angles, keeping that brush very wet. So you can swab the paint on rather than paint it on. And yeah, I've got a longer than usual brush here. Okay, same mistake as last time. Same fix as last time. Lick your finger, run it along the ship, take that paint off it. Just making sure that you can see what I'm doing. So that's it. All I'm doing is swabbing the deck with paint. And if it's patchy, that's okay. I'll come back and fix it up in the next coat. I expect that it will be patchy because I am swabbing rather than using pure paint. It just, when you swab, it's just so much easier because it's going to go into those little nooks and crannies. The longer and thinner the brush, the better. As you can see, there's these little details on the sides of the turret rings that I am having to avoid painting over. Alright, so there we go. There's a first coat on a first bit. And we'll let that dry, and I'll finish off the rest of it and come back and we'll do a second coat and you can see what that looks like. But yeah, essentially the technique is simple. Get a long brush, a brush with long bristles, lots of water, and put the paint onto the Mini, swabbing it rather than painting it. So we're just pushing the paint into the nooks and crannies, changing the angles on the ship so we can attack the spots on the ship that need painting. Anything that we paint over, any of these hatches we paint over with deck, we can come back and repaint with the grey later. It's not that big a deal. But most importantly, we don't want to get the deck colour into these lines on the side of the ship. That's a lot harder to get out. Alright, well I will come back and talk to you about a second coat in a minute. Alright, so I think I found a better painting position. Well, you can see and I can actually paint. Alright, so back to it. Yep, that looks good. Okay, so we found the edge of the ship, and I am just coming along the sides of it like that. Just like that. And then if there's a part of it that I can't get to, I will need to change to a smaller brush. But the bigger brush is better because the bigger brush means we'll get more surface area done, which means this process will take less time. Because painting minis is fun, but ultimately we are painting them so we can put them on table. And if you're like me, one fleet is not enough. Which means you'll be doing a little bit more painting than the average bear. So yeah, all I'm doing is trying to get the paint into the nooks and crannies. Sliding along, sliding along. And as you can see, the more times I come back over, the stronger the colour is. Alright, I'm up to the nose. So we've got the anchor chains I've got to avoid. I just thought this would be another good opportunity to show you the technique that I use. So it's weird, it's not really brushing, it's more like, I don't know, pushing the paint into the crevices really. It's not pretty, but it gets the job done. Just keep pausing to make sure that you can actually see what I'm doing on the camera. Alright, so back to the bow. So all I'm doing is just being careful. I'm not painting, I'm holding the brush on the miniature. Using my finger there to get rid of a bit of paint that I'd put on the bit there. Alright. As you can see, I'm most of the way around. I'll put the brush in here. So, I think this is a good point to stop. Okay, so we have reached impasse because there is a knob there, right behind the boat. I simply can't get the brush in, so I am going to paint over that altogether, and that is one of the unavoidable things that we are going to have to come back and fix up. So I'm just being careful. That's it. There's no real trick to it. I'm laying the brush onto the deck, and I am just, without picking it up, swabbing it around. Just checking you can see that. So I'll just change the position of the ship. I'm just shoving that paint into those spaces. Alright, well, we're almost the whole way around the ship now. Right, so let's have a review. I'm going to put this down. The Mighty Mac is a little bit too big to fit completely in camera. But there you go. So, as I said to you, painting is a process. If you were to stop now, you'd end up with an ugly ship. But, you know, it's never done until it's completely done. So we've got to have to finish this. Alright, we can't stop here. So I'm going to let that paint and the paint dry, and then we'll come back and have a look at the results you get when you come back and do a second coat, because at the moment it's a bit shabby, it's a bit washy, it looks a bit unfinished, doesn't it? Fear not, it will be complete. Alright, so I found a good spot to come back and talk to you about. Okay, so now I've changed to an actual paintbrush. This is a triple O, and the problem is between the anchor chains. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing I've been doing with the enormous brush, except I am moving the brush in and around the anchor chains, just making sure you can see. And I'm swabbing again, and I am doing exactly the stuff you see me do with a bigger brush, except I'm doing it with a smaller brush. I'm just checking that you can see that. Okay. Exactly the same thing, just shoving that paint up there. That's all I'm doing. But because I've got a smaller brush now, it's easier to do. It's just patience. Paching. There we go. So I got in between the anchor chains and around them without actually having to paint over anything important. So I just thought that was important to show you. If you find a piece that you can't swab, change to a smaller brush and swab. Alright, so the first coat's done. Let's get back onto the second coat. Strangely enough, it's exactly the same as the first thing we were doing. In a position where you can see and I can see, and all we're doing is exactly the same thing again. But this time, because we have paint already down, it's actually going to appear a much more solid color. Same process again. I am just swabbing the deck with a brush. Not painting here. Just moving the brush in and around the knobby bits on the deck. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves, play your favourite theme music. Alright, I'm going to swap sides. Attack from the other side. Yep, you can see that. So some of the stuff I am missing and skipping because I will come back with a 000 and get stuck into it with a 000. So as you can see, I'm almost not even bothering to pick the brush up. So the factor of difficulty is quite low. You just have to care a little bit. Alright, coming up to the front. I'm going to run the brush around here. Starting to look good. These things just take time. And as I said, this is the longest part and the most agonizing part of painting the ships. Here's the deck. And we're back up to the bow. Alright, I'll put that down so you can have a look. So, here we go. Much better the second time around, isn't it? It's a solid colour. But once again, we're not finished. Don't give up yet. This is not the time to say, oh, that's good enough. It's not. What we're going to do is we're going to come back and wash around the superstructure with a brown, so we get that shadow effect that we should have there, considering this is an enormous battleship. Alrighty, so when we come back, that's what we'll be doing.